Though it's hard to disagree with the idea that Dean Ambrose hasn't been used to his optimum potential in WWE lately, the story of him reportedly giving the company his notice is still quite alarming. From the time of his debut with Shield mates Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns in the fall of 2012, Ambrose has always had something to do on the programs, winning the modern-day Grand Slam of WWE, Intercontinental, US, and Tag Team Gold, while competing in high-profile matches across a number of pay-per-views. Vince McMahon even name-dropped Ambrose during his infamous brass ring speech as somebody who acquired that loftier standing, so to hear that Ambrose is counting down to an exit is still a bit of a surprise. Dean Ambrose would, however, be far from the first former WWE champion to want out of the company for one reason or another. In the last 3 decades alone, a number of individuals that reached the top of the company mountain have either sought their releases, flat out quit, rode their contract to its expiration, or tried to leave only to be denied. This list will not cover every single instance of these top guys attempting to flee the Stamford compound, but these are 10 of the most prolific instances of wrestling's elite doing just that. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 WWE champions who wanted out. Join us! Number 10, Ric Flair. The Nature Boy was presented as a big deal when he made a grand arrival in WWE in the late summer of 1991, bringing with him the big gold belt that he still maintained possession of. Flair immediately entered into programs with the likes of Rowdy Roddy Piper, Hulk Hogan, and Macho Man Randy Savage. But life was not all a bed of roses for Flair at this point. Despite being presented as a major star, Vince McMahon was apparently somehow sour on his work. And there were conflicts, from Flair being fined and nearly fired for blading at WrestleMania 8, to Flair and Savage being chewed out by an irate McMahon for how a September 1992 match between them was worked. In the latter example, the two were forced to refilm said match. After Flair's second world title reign ended at the hands of Bret Hart, the 43-year-old star gave his notice. He had an out in his contract that permitted him to leave if he felt unsatisfied with his character or role, and upon being told he was going to be phased down in favor of younger wrestlers, chose to exercise it. Flair finished his dates in February 1993 and returned to WCW shortly thereafter. Number 9, Macho Man Randy Savage. Around the time that Flair was divorcing himself from WWE, Savage was also being phased down the card in favor of the forthcoming Young movement. Instead of leaving, Savage took this obvious demotion, which had relegated the two-time champ into the role of part-time star. Savage mostly provided color commentary on the debuting Monday Night Raw beginning in January 1993, and though he still wrestled to a fair degree, his matches were much more infrequent. Savage took umbrage with this new arrangement, feeling he still had something to offer as an in-ring performer, but reportedly McMahon disagreed, wanting to use Savage only as a dialer legend, while primarily relegating him to announcer duties. Throughout 1994, aside from a feud with Crush that built into WrestleMania 10, Savage was taking a backseat to the likes of Roddy Piper, Bob Backlund, Jerry Lawler, and others who were similarly aged. Savage was also reportedly turned down an offer to put over Shawn Michaels in a feud. Fed up with his predicament, Savage brokered a deal with WCW in the fall of 1994, apparently not even giving McMahon a chance to make a counter-offer. Savage called McMahon the morning of a Raw taping in early November of that year to tell him he was gone. Number 8, Diesel. Little more than 1 year earlier, WWE had strapped the rocket to the back of the near 7-foot Kevin Nash, hoping the looming Big Daddy Cool could be the second coming of Hulk Hogan that Vince McMahon was coveting. A year-long run as WWE champion proved to be a flop, though that couldn't be entirely pinned on Diesel's shoulders. The promotion was slumping long before Diesel began wrestling more frequently. When WCW began getting aggressive in their attempts at becoming the hottest wrestling promotion going, Eric Bischoff opened Ted Turner's checkbook and began making overtures to any major commodity that he could. He'd already lured Nash's Buddy Hall to the tune of a hefty guaranteed contract with lesser dates than the WWE schedule. Nash was floored when he heard the terms, and soon enough, he received a similar offer from Eazy-E. Nash was leaning towards staying loyal to McMahon, but an incident at the February 1996 In Your House pay-per-view was allegedly what altered his thinking. Nash was unable to gain approval for a beneficial spot in his WWE title steel cage match against Bret Hart, and felt that his sudden powerlessness meant that McMahon had lost faith in him. Amidst these changing tides, Nash took Bischoff's offer. Number 7, Shawn Michaels. Although Michaels would end up not leaving WWE at this point, he absolutely wanted out. Friction behind the scenes had continued to mount between Michaels and Bret Hart, stemming from a variety of incidents both on and off screen. Michaels' personal issues, his losing his smile, the infamous Sunny Days insinuation he levied towards Hart on Raw, and his insecurity with Hart's massive contract led to an unending animosity between the two. Tensions came to a head the night after the 1997 King of the Ring, when Hart and Michaels had a physical altercation in the locker room. Most accounts of the story have Hart coming out of it the victor, having torn a chunk out of Michaels' hair while also smashing his face with a torrent of blows. After the fight, a battered and frazzled Michaels stormed into McMahon's office, claimed an unsafe working environment, and announced he was quitting. Shortly after Shawn's walkout, McMahon met with Michaels and his father in San Antonio, Texas to try to coax him back. There, Michaels asked for his release, wanting to rejoin his clique buddies in WCW. McMahon refused to grant the request, reasoning with Michaels that he would be more miserable in a company he felt wouldn't know how to use him. Number 6. Brock Lesnar. In 2 years' time on the WWE roster, the man known as the next big thing would main event WrestleMania, win a King of the Ring tournament, a Royal Rumble match, and hold the top belt on 3 occasions, becoming the youngest WWE champion ever. Lesnar would score clean pinfall victories over stars such as Kurt Angle, The Undertaker, and The Rock, while being well protected in the main event tier, due both to his menacing appearance and his unparalleled strength and athleticism. During his second year with the company, Lesnar began to grow weary of the WWE lifestyle, tiring of the constant travel, the politics, and the head games, and lamented that he was resorting to heavy amounts of vodka and painkillers in order to manage constant physical aches. Although he'd signed a massive contract in the summer of 2003, by early 2004, he had lost interest in continuing on. After letting his frustrations simmer for months, everything spilled over after a tour of South Africa, complete with long hours crammed in an airplane in February 2004. Lesnar went to McMahon at the SmackDown tapings 2 weeks before WrestleMania 20 and told him he was quitting. Lesnar worked WrestleMania with Goldberg in a rather infamous match due to both men leaving, and off Brock went to try football. Number 5. Chris Jericho. Prior to signing on the dotted line with All Elite Wrestling, Jericho had spent the previous decade plus enjoying relatively short tenures with WWE, coming and going in spells of varying lengths. He would return, work a few angles, and then be off to pursue whatever he wanted, be they commitments with Fozzy, other media endeavours, or just quality time at home with the wife and kids. But before this run of stop-start tenures began, Jericho spent 6 continuous years on the WWE roster from August 1999 to August 2005, ever present and prominent with no time off for injuries. But by 2005, Jericho had started to become besieged with the burnout. His drive to be the best in the world had diminished, and he admitted that it was becoming harder to leave his family behind to go on long touring runs. Jericho wanted to explore other avenues of entertainment and have more time with his loved ones. And so it came to pass before a Raw taping in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania in May 2005 that Jericho told Vince that he wasn't interested in re-signing when his contract came up that July. Vince's only request was that Jericho sign a brief extension in order to work SummerSlam, which Jericho did, putting over WWE champion John Cena. After that, Jericho left WWE behind for more than 2 years. Number 4. Kurt Angle. Speaking of wrestlers who are driven, that brings us to Angle, a man who not only won an Olympic gold medal in freestyle wrestling with a broken freaking neck, but would push himself through his professional wrestling career with lingering compromising injuries. Working WrestleMania 19 with spinal damage and SummerSlam 2003 with a torn hamstring are just a couple of examples of the highly physical Angle going all out while badly ailing. By 2006, Angle looked much different than he had in previous years. His arms were bandier, he'd become more prone to injuries, and his general demeanor seemed much less at ease. As Angle would later admit in several interviews, he was a physical wreck at this stage of his career and said that he'd been abusing painkillers between 2002 and 2005. Angle claims he asked McMahon several times for time off, as well as asking about a possible rehab stint, but was always denied. In August 2006, 1 week before SummerSlam, Angle tore his abdominal, hamstring, and groin while working a house show match with Rob Van Dam. Angle was told he had to make the next TV taping anyway, at which time he angrily dropped his pants in front of Vince to show him the severity of the injuries. Angle was so incensed by that episode that he demanded his release and received it the following week. Number 3. Batista. At the time he debuted on the main roster as the menacing bodyguard for Reverend Devon, it seemed like the former Leviathan was stuck in a dead-end role. But those fortunes would change before long. Once he dropped the Deacon part of his name and adopted the scary metal theme music, Batista became a force to be reckoned with. The Evolution connection raised his profile, and with his understated coolness along with steady improvement, crystallized him as a star. Batista became a main event fixture in 2005, up until he left the company in May of 2010 at the age of 41. At the time of his exit, Big Dave was still headlining pay-per-views, battling it out with John Cena for the WWE Championship in an I Quit match at Over the Limit, his final match for nearly 4 years. Batista had apparently been unhappy for some time in WWE and had expressed displeasure with the creative direction that the company had been taking. In a 2018 interview, Batista added that he wanted to explore acting opportunities, which WWE was reportedly not willing to let him do. So Batista, whose contract expired at the end of May, allowed his deal to run out and left to pursue other opportunities. Good choice, Drax. Number 2, CM Punk. Batista's return coincided with the unexpected exodus of one of WWE's most popular stars. CM Punk had reached icon status in the summer of 2011, first with his oft-referenced and cited pipe bomb promo, and continuing into his dramatic WWE Championship victory over John Cena in his native Chicago. Though he would hold the belt once more for a 14-month reign, that night in the Windy City marked Punk's ultimate moment. Through the mammoth reign that followed, and the remainder of that 2013 calendar year, Punk found himself dealing with continuous unhappiness from two primary sources: WWE Creative and his own health. Regarding the former, Punk believed that he'd been creatively stifled and was unhappy with catering to Vince McMahon's whims without being satisfactorily paid back. Punk felt that there were no long-term plans for him or many other deserving stars and lamented that kind of negative environment. As far as his health goes, Punk pushed himself through knee and rib injuries, as well as a reported staph infection that WWE doctor Chris Amann allegedly diagnosed as a simple fatty deposit and refused to remove. Punk wouldn't have the lump removed until weeks after he walked out of the WWE, doing so the day after the 2014 Royal Rumble. He was officially terminated from the company that June and considers himself to be retired from wrestling. Number 1, Daniel Bryan. Bryan's history of concussions throughout his wrestling career, reported by some sources to be more than 20, played a big role in WWE's medical director Dr. Joseph Maroon making the call for him to be retired. Maroon's recommendation came after he learned that Bryan had suffered 2 seizures in 2012 that were thought to be concussion-related. Other doctors had cleared Bryan, but Maroon would not, and because of Maroon's unwillingness to clear him, Bryan gave a reluctant retirement speech on Raw in February 2016. In spite of the farewell, Bryan refused to believe that his career was over. As we know, he would eventually return to the ring after Maroon thoroughly examined him in March 2018 before giving WWE his blessing to let Bryan wrestle again. But in those interim 2 years, Bryan was extremely unhappy with his situation and was determined to wrestle again, WWE or no WWE. Bryan's contract at the time expired in September 2018. 2 years earlier, on the day of his heated talking smackdown with The Miz, Bryan asked WWE for his release, only to be turned down. His WWE contract was frozen for a time, which due to his inactivity may have made its end a day that would never even come. But thanks to Dr. Maroon's clearance, not only is Bryan wrestling again, but he's also toting around a WWE Championship made of hemp and wood, so all thanks to the good doctor. So that's our list. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and you can follow me on Twitter here. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.